Erev Tov Chavrim, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Very serious broadcast this evening. Did the United States and Israel actually hack Iranian air defenses that caused the downing of Flight 752? I know that's a very strong accusation to put out there, but we're going to be going into all kinds of things today. We'll be covering that story there. We'll be talking about also Russia, President Putin, totally, in his State of the Union address, kind of really turns the government upside down on its head. But in reality, what's he doing? He's preparing to make sure he stays in power after he leaves in 2024. Medvedev gladly stepping aside as Putin sets in his new predecessor, much like Boris Yeltsin did years ago when, of course, President Putin was a young unknown at that time as well. We'll be looking into that story tonight. The U.S. as well. China signs a Phase 1 trade deal to ease global economic sanctions, or economic tension there. Can't help but think that that's something to give Trump a little feather in his hat to keep him in power. Make him look like he's making America great again, besides building all the bombs, missiles, and things like that to destroy other nations, right? Okay, so let's get back to what's going on here. Truth as they knew it. Fate of Ukrainian plane initially known only to a very small circle in Iran. Yeah. And that small circle did know that the plane was taken down by the air defense missile shield. But why was it such a small circle? I do want to thank, I forget the sister's name that sent either this article or another article I'm going to be sharing with you to me, bringing this to my attention. But I actually have been sitting on this information now for several days, from the very day that this plane went down, because my own Middle East correspondent shared with me. We discussed this. We discussed the possibility that the system was hacked by either Israel or the United States, and the downing of the plane because of all the information we've reported to you over the months. And I can only go back and remind you how that Israel, if you remember, invaded Iranian airspace there, totally undetected. The Middle Eastern Monitor pointing that out. Iran Air Force chief fired for Israeli jets undetected violation of airspace. You remember that happened last year, September. And Brigadier General Farzad Ismaili was fired, actually in May, I apologize, in May by the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei after he concealed the violations of Iranian airspace by Israeli Air Force F-35 stealth jetter fighters, right? They got in there. How did they get in there? How did Israel get those fighters in there? Well, from what we're understanding is that Israel and the United States both had learned to be able to hack their air defense system. Initially, when I reported this, I reported that it was possible that Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, may have leaked the information to the Israelis on how to overcome the S-300 system. But it wasn't just the S-300 system that was compromised. It was also an Iranian-built air defense system that was also compromised, and Israel was able to fly in totally unimpeded. All right, so it's kind of like tit for tat when it comes to technology, because also we know that the United States got a clear message sent to them when the Iranians fired in retaliation for the death of General Qasem Soleimani. They fired multiple rockets into 2 American bases inside of Iraq, just doing major pinpoint devastation, and the United States could do nothing to stop it. You know, it's kind of interesting. Even the death of Soleimani, as we pointed out, it was no accident that he was killed. He was there on a peace mission. And in fact, when Pompeo comes before the American people and gives you more propaganda, saying, and even says he gets a laugh out of the media that this was totally untrue, there was no history of Soleimani on any kind of peace mission. We went back and pulled up our November 6th broadcast where we showed you then Soleimani was in Iraq on a secret mission with the Saudi national, or excuse me, the Saudi prince, trying to bring about a peace negotiations for the riots happening inside of Iraq, as well as ceasefire in Yemen. We even said to you then that the Houthi rebels had a major surprise for the Saudis if they did not come to a peace agreement. And once again, we were given the intel that he was there for a peace agreement. And of course, the Prime Minister of Iraq saying the exact same thing. We'd also reported to you it was U.S. and Israeli involvement that was involved in Iraq trying to cause destabilization long before they ever tried to blame it on General Soleimani. But there's something you need to know before we continue in this broadcast. And this is on a it's on a website that's, you got to be careful because they do sometimes have some awkward advertisement. But I want to share this with you. This is Humans Are Free. Right? And this website here, U.S. government propaganda use against American citizens is officially legal now. You know, you have to go back, as the article says here, got to go back in the government back in 1948 when we were given to use propaganda use against American citizens, was legalized back in 1948 to be used abroad. Right? It's called the Education Exchange Act of 1948. Okay? Now, in I think it is, let me read a little bit of this article. It actually highlighted more than what I anticipated it would. If you recall, the CIA was even caught back in the 1970s using its own planted journalists in America, print media, and television to get around the restriction on bringing the government's foreign propaganda home. Operation Mockingbird, a third of the CIA budget went to media propaganda operations. And in 2013, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2013, in which the Smith-Mundt Act was officially amended to allow American pro-government propaganda material produced by the State Department and Broadcast Board of Governors to be released inside the United States. So yes, here in our good old United States, just like they say here, the State Department spokesman bursting into laughter at welcoming the journalist to his press conference, which he referred to sarcastically as an exercise of transparency and democracy. Let's listen in. Okay, this is fascinating to see this video right here too, by the way. So I got to share this with you because, you know, you think you're being told the truth. You're not being told the truth. Listen to what he says here.
State Department. I think we have some interns in the back. Welcome. Good to see you in this exercise in transparency and democracy.
Is that what it is?
Sorry, I didn't mean to break
I thought it was an exercise in spin and obfuscation.
All right. Can you tell us?
All right. The journalist answering him there, the spin is exactly right. In fact, I like a lot of his responses there if you ever listen to the State Department there. But again, I remind you, in 2013, they amended it to allow American pro-government propaganda materials produced by the State Department and Broadcast Board of Governors to be released inside the United States. So you are officially lied to. You're officially lied to by the President of the United States. You can be officially lied to by the State Department, by Mike Pompeo, who actually came out when I had reported that General Soleimani was on a peace mission there. He made a mock of it at the State Department and laughed about it and said, is there any history whatsoever? I proved there was history, but he has a legal right to lie to you. All right? So keep this in mind as you listen to mainstream media. They're there to lie to you. So at any rate, the Israelis had been able to penetrate the air defense systems inside of Iran. And of course, Iran, they gave their great advancement in technology. I shared with you how that one Pentagon source had told me that Iran had a technology that the United States was unable to mitigate. Now, he never said to me what that technology was. I want to make that clear. He didn't say what that technology was. I am assuming that technology, like in the case that I shared with you just recently, earlier in the week there, was the fact that they can bomb indiscriminately different locations, whether it be Israel, whether it be U.S. interests in the Middle East, and we have no way to knock their missiles out of the sky. Just like the United States and Israel can hack their missile defense shields, and they can fly in unimpeded and bomb inside of Iran. But Iran can too. They can send the missiles over, and our Patriot systems could do nothing to stop it. That may not be that technology that we are unable to mitigate, but I know one thing, the State Department official was very nervous about that particular technology. All right, so let's look at some other things here. This article right here, this is speaking about this video here that was published not long after it was received. It's very important to notice this. Question over the shoot down video. A mobile phone video supposedly taken by an amateur bystander. Notice that. Russian Sputnik News says it. Supposedly taken by an amateur bystander in Tehran purports to show the moment of an Iranian air defense missile hits the doomed civilian airliner. The 19-second video was published by the New York Times on January the 9th, the day after the fatal crash in which all 176 people on board were killed. I was already in touch as soon as we heard about the plane crash with my Middle East correspondent, and we were discussing the very fact that Israel and the United States had hacked their anti-defense system, their missile defense shield, and could it have been that they actually engaged that plane themselves? I know some people would say, I can't believe you would say that. I can't believe you'd say that the United States or Israel would do something like this. Well, one, Iran could never admit it. And this is what we discussed privately with my source there, that the United States or Israel has been able to hack their system. That's what he shared with me. It would be too much of a great risk to their own national security to admit this, that they have that weakness. And we'd already been discussing this. And I'm going to get into that in just a moment, because there is a history of that, and that was that F-35. When Israel brought those F-35s in there, they got in there and got past their defense system, and of course the Khomeini fired the very general. In fact, let's go back to that before we continue on with this. Right? It was reported in Kuwait's Al Jarada, right? The senior Iranian military officials, intelligence service of Iran Revolutionary Guards Corps, only started to investigate the case under the direct order of the Khomeini after a report in March. One of the sources cited said that the Iran's air defense system, as well as its Russian S-300 anti-missile system, failed to detect the Israeli fighter jets entering into and leaving Iranian airspace, and that Ismaili kept the information secret in order to conceal his own operational failure. You see, Iran is very good at finding a fall guy. Just like the United States, President Trump lied to the American people when the Houthis sent a drone over inside of Saudi Arabia and was unable to be detected by the Patriot systems that we've given the Saudis. And of course, Trump blames incompetence of the Saudi military on not knowing how to use the system, and they attacked their oil refineries there. But all the while, they were working on peace negotiations to end this violence, because it's just tit for tat. Both sides have technology that the other doesn't. All right? So when the United States killed General Soleimani while he's on a peace mission there, with the proof to show that he was there, November 6th, Israeli News Live, we reported he was there on a peace mission. We had no idea he was up for being assassinated by the United States. And Amir Safarti admitting he's the big pro-Zionist that supports all the terrorist acts that are done by Netanyahu. He admitted the intelligence of Israel was involved in every step of the way of the assassination of General Soleimani. All right? And General Soleimani, he's killed while he's on a peace trip. And then Iran retaliates, showing their might, showing their technology. Just like they did when they flew the drones and the missiles over into Saudi Arabia undetected. Now this time they showed that, okay, Mr. President, you said to the American people the Saudis were incompetent. What are you going to say to them when we bomb your bases there inside of Iraq? Are you going to say also that the Americans are incompetent to be able to shoot down our missiles? No, they have a technology, and from what my source tells me, it can absorb the radar that is used by our defense shields. and therefore they can't detect it. It doesn't bounce off the missile coming in, and they cannot shoot it down. They can't see it coming. Just like the Americans and Israelis learned to hack into the Iranian system, and the Iranians can't see the planes coming. So they both have an upper edge on one another. Now, from what I was told, no Americans were killed. May have been injuries, but no deaths. They said that the Iranians actually gave advance warning to the Iraqis. The Iraqis relayed it to the Americans. They were able to go to the bunkers. It wasn't because, as President Trump lied to the American people and said, our early warning system told us it was coming. Yeah, the early warning system was Iran told the Iraqis are firing this. And from what I was told by my own Middle East source there, is that it was done intentionally to show the United States, we can strike you inside of here, your soldiers, and they cannot. You cannot stop us. And that was a message to send to Israel as well. Now, of course, America has nuclear weapons, so does Israel. They could take Iran out with no problem. And they can hack their systems, right? So this is all a tit for tat, constantly back and forth. All right, so now we come to the issue about this, this video that appears, right? So Sputnik reports on this. A mobile phone video supposedly taken by the amateur bystander, Tehran purports to show the moment an Iranian air defense missile hits the doomed civilian airliner. The 19-second video was published by the New York Times on January the 9th, day after the fatal crash in which all 176 people on board were killed. Flight PS-752 at Boeing 737 took off from Tehran's Imam Khomeini Airport at 6:12 a.m. local time. About 2 minutes later, while flying over Tehran's suburb of Paran, the aircraft became stricken and reportedly stopped by sending flight data. The jet flew for another minute and a half before slamming into the ground. All right? Now, they're going to get into this article in a moment about the oddity. Not only that, how the New York Times was able to pinpoint the accuracy, where the guy was, satellite imagery and everything. And it's just like, it's so weird that this guy just so happens to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning outside just filming an airplane and a missile going by just for the fun of it. It's like he knew. Kind of like the Twin Towers when we had the dancing Israelis out there. Listen, you know, I come from a Jewish family. I love my people, but I guarantee you one thing. I do not care for those that are willing to just to kill, maim, and murder innocent people. 3,000 Americans lost their lives. And yet we blame it on some bunch of little yaywads called Al-Qaeda militants that, you know, the flames from the burning of the building melted the steel, but their passports could just manage to just float right down there for the inspectors to find it. Isn't that interesting? How gullible are we? Oh, I forgot. They got that act that they can lie to you. That's right. We're not going to tell you what really happened here. They won't tell you about the Israelis that had a secret thing inside the building there that were camping out. There's some of those guys out there that do news now that talk about being there the night before. I won't call no names on that. That's kind of interesting. Talking about how the world would change when these buildings fall to the ground. Well, that's an interesting thought to think about, isn't it? Anyway, nonetheless, they talk about another amateur video apparently taken from a family car traveling on a motorway. Shows the plane on fire before it crashes with a massive explosion from the crash site. It appears that the pilot was trying to turn the stricken jet to the airport. This later video seems a plausible random observation, as Sputnik brings out. But it says Western intelligence agencies are claiming that the airliner was struck by 2 surface-to-air missiles fired by Iranian military. It's amazing how much the U.S. knew about this before anybody else did, before any investigation or anything, and that's what the article brings out as well. How did they know so much about this? Really strange, right? So, when you get down a little further, though, in the article, suspiciously, the narrative is being railroaded by Western intelligence before any chance of objective established the facts of circumstance of the accident. Telling, too, Bellingcat has weighed in at an early stage to reinforce Western intelligence accusations against Iran. Which brings us back, it says in the article, to the New York Times and the 19-second video published purporting to show a missile strike on the aircraft. You know, he even shows the missile before it even gets there. The video is credited by the newspaper to an Iranian person by name who appears to have been standing in an apartment complex in Tehran's suburb of Paran. Maybe investigators should inquire about this person's background. The New York Times claims it had the video verified and location from which it was taken identified by satellite within hours of the crash. That's super efficient, don't you think? So, it seems to be very suspect, if you ask me. Now, if we look here, go here to the Times of Israel, and every time I highlight the information I want to share with you on this article, it always seems to disappear. U.S. cyber attack on Iran exploited flaw in heavily guarded networks, experts say. Assault that crippled the Revolutionary Guard missile system, results of massive investment in cyber warfare by American military, likely to took extensive preparation. I think it's interesting that the Times of Israel immediately, they make this article, and of course this is back in June of 2019, but they're talking about the U.S. ability to already hack in to Iran's missile systems, right? The article goes on, a cyber attack, okay, on Iranian missile systems claimed by U.S. last week would have had to exploit a flaw in the heavily guarded network, experts said. So there was a flaw in Iranian network. Isn't it interesting? Every time, including the situation with the downing of the plane and supposedly protesters were everywhere, Iran shuts down the internet, right? Just like you see right here. Iran shut down the internet to stop protests, but for how long? This, of course, it's an older article, about 6 months ago, this one is. But we're seeing Iran is shutting down the internet a lot. But they've only been doing it, if you really think about it. If you look at the news articles and follow the right trail here, you'll realize that the Iranians have been shutting down their internet at the time since they found out that that their system is vulnerable. Military computing security is usually hardened to defend against attack, but highly skilled computer scientists and cyber units of modern armies are always working to find a way in. The simplest way would be for Special Forces members to plug in a USB and carry a virus into the right place. By the way, that means actually getting it there, right? I had a friend of mine who worked Special Forces, and he was sitting behind the lines in the Iraqis and was able to do that countless of times. This is almost certainly how the well-known U.S.-Israeli Stuxnet virus was introduced in 2010 into the computers of Iran's nuclear complex, according to experts. Iran at the time accused the U.S. and Israel of using virus to target its centrifuges and use uranium enrichment. Revolutionary Guard are believed to have since bolstered precautionary measures in a bid to isolate their military computer networks from the internet. However, according to a military expert who requested anonymity, in an anti-aircraft defense system requires radars, control and command centers and ground-to-air missile sites to be interconnected. So they have to use internet. But now that Iran is openly admitted it was an accident, they shot it down, they're taking the blame because they don't want to admit that their system was hacked. They can't afford for that to go public. Now watch this. Israel gives you a little hint. I thought it was an interesting article. Breaking defense. Israel hacks at Iranian tentacles. I think it's interesting the way they put it. They compare Iran to an octopus, but they talk about hacking the octopus. Not cutting off the tentacles or chopping off the tentacles, but hack. Why do they have to use a cyber word for Iran's tentacles, right? The article goes on to say, wherever you stretch your tentacles, we will hack them off. Interesting. Now, they also said, we have not yet threatened the head of the octopus. I want you to see this one. We have not yet threatened the head of the octopus, Tehran, but it is possible to start approaching the head of the Iranian octopus, he warned. Tens of targets were attacked in Damascus, west of Damascus, in the Syrian Golan Heights, belonging both to Bashar al-Assad's regime and Iran's Quds forces. It can be assumed the massive attack was performed after Israel notified Russian forces proof the Russian-made S-300 surface air system, still controlled by Russia's, were not used against the attack aircraft and were not struck by Israel. In other words, Israel shut down, they hacked their air defense systems, the Iranian air defense systems, and stopped them from being able to detect Israeli strikes. But the interesting thing is that Israel threatened to attack Tehran. I think after the U.S. killed Soleimani, Iran retaliated with its own show of force that they could send missiles undetected by the U.S. or by Israel. Their message was received. Either the United States or Israel, one, I believe, did hack their system. Israel claiming they're going to hack Tehran. And just like in the case of 9/11, although it was innocent Canadians, innocent Iranians, and other nationals that were on board this plane, it was a message being sent. And they knew good and well that Iran would never admit to being hacked, that Iran would suck up and take the blame. There's some very interesting times we're living in. Anyway, in closing here, as we finish out in this report here. By the way, immunity at 2020 votes, according to Sputnik. Soleimani's liquidation seen as Netanyahu's victory in Israel's according to Israel's publicist. Benjamin Netanyahu's political opponents are seeking to quickly reject his immunity request, thus opening the door to his trial. Israeli publicists Ivgador Iskin and Nele Gutana have explained what's behind the rush and how the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani has affected Netanyahu's image. On Sunday, the Blue and White Party, which we won't go into all this, but just to kind of let you know, and I'll share the link with you in there. Also, Israel. There was 4 rockets fired into Israel earlier today. Israel also responding with attacks inside of Gaza. I don't know as far as fatalities. Normally on Israel's side, it's very rare that ever happens, but that was a response earlier. President Putin made some major shakeups today. Russian political earthquake. Putin sets out plan to Kremlin departure and Medvedev resigns. And it seems like Putin is setting up, even though he's talking about leaving in 2024, he's also making it to where the next president will have less powers. There'll be more powers with the prime minister. He put in a prime minister, Mikhail Mishustin. He became the new prime minister. And Medvedev is not being thrown under the bus, though. He's going to still have some work to do there with President Putin. Looks like both these guys are going to go into retirement. It was as a report. It wasn't just any normal State of the Union address, but the president now, as he made these changes, spoke about he's going to do term limit on the presidents that come in. They can only have 2 terms, 12 years max, But if you think back when Putin, back in 1999, when he was handpicked by then Yeltsin, he was an unknown as well, and it seems like that Putin is doing the same thing. He's placing a man in position to secure his still control on the Russian government. So today the president shall set up the roadmap for an exit from the Kremlin, more or less kicking off the build-up to the transition of power. He will step down in 2024, perhaps even earlier, and he intends to dismantle the hyper-presidential system, which allowed him to wield so much control in office. This was introduced by Boris Yeltsin in 1993, right? Supported by the Americans, but it was never actually implemented, so Putin was able to still remain in power. He plans to give more powers to the latter body, with the Prime Minister in particular enjoying more authority. He also wants to bulk up the role of the State Council. Indeed, he will probably end up there himself after leaving office in some sort of elder statesman role. So it seems to me that the president is planning on keeping a tight control on the country, at least while he is yet alive. This here is the IDF strikes against Hamas targets in Gaza Strip, surfaced on social media today. The Israeli Defense Forces late on Wednesday struck several installations in the northern part of Gaza Strip, allegedly belonging to the Hamas. The air raid came in response to serial launch of arson balloons and rocket fire, allegedly by Palestinians toward Israel. The IDF confirmed the strike late on Wednesday. Various video recordings of the alleged Tel Aviv response have surfaced on social media. One video depicts a major explosion in the residential area, purportedly in Gaza Strip. The cam is apparently stable and allows viewers to observe a powerful blast and burst of fire. And you can see this. Oh wow, they actually took it down. Anyway, the second clip looks like a shortcut from the lengthy CCTV footage that may have caught the moment of the IDF raid against Hamas. Despite its relatively good video quality, the clip shows only a very distant and quick glow in the night, said to have been caused by the detonated missile there. Anyway, so it's just a world in chaos. See here, this one here. Yeah, you can just see it off in the distance. That's interesting. Now, why do they turn it away and then pull it back? Oh well. Doesn't matter. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Sorry about a little bit of a chopped up message here. Had to re-record this several times to make sure we got the information concise and to the point. Thank you for your support of this ministry. You can visit our website, israelinewslive.org, and our address, as always, appears right here at the bottom of the screen. Thank you and good evening.